I just came back from the Vancouver International Burlesque Festival. If you've never seen a burlesque festival, if you don't even know what that is, I conveniently have a little video right here that you can watch all about the introduction of what is a burlesque festival. You've seen festivals, maybe you've watched them, maybe you've watched them on social media from afar, you've heard about them, you've heard the hype, and you are feeling ready to apply to your first festival. First of all, it is very different applying to a burlesque festival than any other community show. And the nice thing about festivals is they're a little bit more generic. There's a pretty similar format with all festivals. There's definitely some that have unique aspects to them, but for the most part, you're gonna have the same process. So some festivals will have one producer who does everything. Other festivals have an actual team. Some have an adjudication team dedicated to just looking at videos and applications and picking the top 50%, and then the final producers curate the show. So your act that you apply with might be reviewed by one individual. It could be looked at 10 different individuals. Before you even begin to apply, I say this in a lot of videos, I say this in my day-to-day life all the time, do your research. Doing your research can be something as simple as going on their website. What kind of acts do they tend to feature? If it's a mostly classic burlesque festival and you do a lot of neo, a lot of weird burlesque, a lot of contemporary, chances are you're gonna have a much smaller chance of getting into the classic burlesque festival. There's a lot of things you can learn from festivals, from doing your research. You can learn about certain festivals that have a history that you really don't want to be involved with. Doing your research, whether that's looking on the website, realizing, oh, what the funk burlesque, it is funk music. I don't have any acts to that. The New York Nordlesque Festival, I have a Nordlesque act. That makes sense for me to apply to that festival. If I have an act around their theme, then I can apply. If I don't, I will probably not apply. And also that will go with looking at the website, talking to people who've been in the festival before can really give me a stronger understanding of that festival's values, how they produce, how they create safer spaces for people, because to me those are really important for me and any shows that I do. It makes me really excited to be part of those festivals. So yeah, start off, do your research. And in your research as well, you will find this on the websites of the festivals. Know what city and country the festival takes place. And based on that, you can budget. Can you afford to be in that festival? Can you afford to travel to that city? Because of that, knowing whether or not you can actually afford to travel there, and even can you afford to do however many festivals in a year, making sure you do that, making sure you know if you can afford it, and also know that when you do apply, this is kind of changing a little bit nowadays, but usually festivals will have an actual application fee. So you have to pay X amount of dollars in order to submit an application. Usually it's $10, $15, $20. When you're doing your research, maybe you're doing this before applications are even open. Maybe you're looking for next year's festivals. Take note of that deadline. Keep in mind when the deadline is. Remember when the applications close. There we go. I did my speech. Keep in mind when that application closes because you do not want to miss it. And festivals get a lot of applications. Usually a festival is 2 or 3 days, so it might have anywhere between say 40 to maybe 60-ish spots, performer slots for the entire 2 or 3 days that the festival is going on. And they might have over 100 or 200 applications. So if people miss the deadline after the application has been open for a month, producers are not gonna leave it open for those last few people because of that capacity and because of how much work it takes to review those applications. Even if you're like looking at the application, if it's open, if you still have like a month or 2 weeks before it closes, but you're like, I'm not gonna apply today, even looking at the application beforehand so you know what the questions are can be super helpful. When you get to the point you are ready to apply, you've done your research, you're like, this is a festival I want to be in, I trust these producers. Also know who the producers are of those festivals because it goes a long way, trust me. But with that said, you're ready to apply. Next, you want to consider your act. acts. Most festivals will only have applications for 1 or 2 acts. Some festivals do allow individuals to apply with more than 2 acts. However, if that's the case, then often, not always, but often you do have to pay for a second application with any of those extra acts. So it does add up over time if you decide to apply with every act you may have created. So I would consider choosing either your best acts, stick to what's authentic to you, but also if you feel you have a really strong act, you can apply with it. And also if you have an act, again, going back to like the Burlesque show, if you have something that fits that theme, those are pretty given acts that you're gonna apply with if you only have so many of them compared to your other acts. I know this should seem really obvious, but even for someone like me, I always have to keep this in mind, and I often forget it, and I often regret it. Be realistic. Can you afford to travel to the city with this oversized prop? Or can you afford to travel with this oversized costume that probably does not fit into your carry-on bag and it will need to get checked? Trust me, you do not want to travel with the oversized stuff because it will be a headache the entire time, even when you're at the festival. When you apply, most festivals will require video footage of your act. However, with that, there is a lot of diversity in videos usually. So often a lot of people prefer to use the live performance videos in front of an audience. Maybe it's when they felt really strong about their act. Maybe they have a professional videographer. Again, another reality of burlesque is those are very few and far between chances to have really good video. A lot of festivals will accept something that was filmed on your phone as long as it's like landscape or like a good enough footage where you can see your act. As long as you can see your act, hear the music, get the idea and the core of the act, that's usually good enough. I know people who have been in festivals who videotape themselves in their living room. Again, different festivals are going to have different preferences, but for the most part, nowadays you should find a lot of people pushing for, as long as I know what your act is and I have a concrete idea of it and I can see it, you're good. Consider acts that you have fully developed. But most festivals, I would say, pick an act that has a very well-developed life. For me, I want to use my acts that have the strongest characterization, stage presence, clear concept, and something that I'm feeling very solid in. With that, you can definitely have updates between your video to when the festival is. And in that case, if there's a little section for notes, I might say that, be like, this is what the act looks like now. Keep that in mind. And another thing, when you are filling out your tech form, often there is a section that says act description. The act description, even if you have a video, fill it out. The act description is essentially the bare bones. If I've never seen your act, what does it look like? What is your act? And don't get too creative. There are certain performers who have actual workshops where they specifically talk about how to make a good act description for festivals. It is an art. It does take a lot of time to consider how to describe something. Even when you think it might be the simplest thing, you might struggle when suddenly you have to do it for a festival. And so for me, when I apply to a festival, the big things I keep in mind are in my description. What does the costume look like? What is the mood? What is the style or the theme? And does it mean anything to me? Maybe I'll get a little bit creative, but usually the creativity should be the last thing. And don't be afraid to give things away in that description, because again, it's so the adjudicators and everyone who's looking at your video or looking at your application can get a clear idea of what to expect on stage. And even maybe add context of, what does this mean to you? Why is this important to you? What is going on that I cannot see just from watching? And another thing that you might see in your application forms, you'll have all of your kind of generic information. It might ask for the title of the act. It will probably ask for your name and where you're living, like what city are you from. It will probably ask like just generic kind of personal information, like how long have you been performing, maybe why do you want to perform at this festival. And you'll probably also see a thing in a lot of tech forms that says, do you need a billet? And also one thing about application forms, again, festivals can be very different with how they do them. Some festivals might actually ask for all of your tech notes in the application form, and some festivals might only get you to fill that portion out after you've been accepted into the festival. So most festivals will actually have a time limit. You'll see when you go onto their websites and even probably into the application form, they'll probably have a link that's like, These are the rules or the guidelines. Make sure to read them before you apply. So that's part of research. And I do say, no matter what it is, whether it is your generic personal about you information, whether it's just tell me about the act, whether it is tech notes, make sure you are filling out the form as accurately as you can. There are producers who will void applications if there are sections skipped. If in the text form it says to please send your photos or please send your music to this email, make sure you are sending music to that email or you are contacting that email. Don't go to social media messaging producers. Make sure you are sending high quality MP3 files that you've downloaded for your music. Don't use YouTube conversions. With good sounding equipment, you can tell that is not good quality. So make sure you are buying your music, especially if you're being paid for it. Ethical burlesque means that everyone's getting paid, not just us as performers. Another thing that often causes people to not be accepted in festivals or to have their applications be completely not reviewed, making sure you are paying your fee. If you do not pay the application fee, that application is void. And once your application is submitted, you can rest. Possibly, depending on who you are and your personality. But most of the applications should also have an expectation of when you should hear back by. Not all of them, but a lot of them should. In my mind, every single festival, every producer, even if it's a regular community show, for me, I just think ethically and also for everybody's peace of mind, producers should be emailing every single applicant, whether or not they've been accepted. Festivals, it's a lot more common to have both. If this is your first time applying to a festival, or even if you're still new, even after like a few years of applying to festivals, it could take a moment to process when you've been accepted, or maybe imposter syndrome can creep in saying like, why did I get this spot? There are so many people who I know who are better than me, who applied and did not get in. Anytime I apply to a festival, when it comes around that time of the notifications going out, I make sure to kind of take care of myself a little bit more. Either way, whether that's me making sure I have like a nice cozy cup of tea with me, maybe I'm like all just like casually at home. I don't want to be like rushing off to a meeting or like in the middle of between meetings. I want to make sure I have capacity and time to look at any emails, whether I've been accepted or not, because it can be hard. Sometimes you get accepted and the festival's in a month and you have to figure out how to travel in a month to across the country. Making sure that you do have that time to kind of really reflect on how you're feeling, maybe have somebody with you if you can. If you are not accepted in a festival, know that that is absolutely okay. I know it can sting at times, especially if it's an act that's really close to your heart, but know that again, there's a lot of people who apply to festivals, often way more than there are spots. Knowing that even if you're not accepted in a festival this year, it's not a never, it's just a not this time. I know it can still hurt even when you know that. It's a process, and so make sure that you can take care of yourself if you're not accepted into a festival. But if you are accepted into a festival, again, make sure you're still taking care of yourself, taking time to celebrate, to be excited, taking time to process and plan whatever you need to do, because traveling for festivals is a really big deal, and the fact that you are accepted and they want you means that you deserve to be there. Even if you were not accepted, you still deserve to be there. So I'm curious, I have a lot of questions today. If you've applied, if you are an avid festival performer, what are some tips or tricks or advice that you have? I would love to see it down in the comments down below. If you're brand new to festivals and you're just starting out, I'd love to hear what questions you have, or is there anything you're really looking forward to, or things that you're really nervous about, or even what festivals are you excited to apply to? Any thoughts? I'm super excited to see them all. Leave them down below. I know this is just one step. Again, I have my other video talking about festivals. This is step 2. I'm excited to see all of you applying and figuring it out as you go, as we do in Burlesque. With that, I will see you next time, and hopefully at a festival one day. Bye! Why, hello again. This is Editing Cherry, jumping on to say that if you are interested in extended cuts of the videos that I provide on YouTube, or templates, or any deeper dives into my personal burlesque life, you can check them out now on my brand new Patreon. Woo! I have just recently started a Patreon at Cheeky Burlesque, and you can follow me right there if you want to support my art financially, as well as get a little bit of benefits for yourself, a little bit deeper than you can on YouTube right here. It is new, it is exciting, and I hope to see you there.